When I tell people online that I'm an atheist, they often start going on about the atheist worldview. And atheism isn't a worldview, it's just I don't believe in God. But that I'm an atheist doesn't mean I don't have a worldview, it just means that atheism isn't one, and as such, atheism cannot be my worldview. But I do have one. Everyone has one, how they view and interpret the world, the things they think that are best in life. But it's been a challenging few years for my worldview. Very challenging. I like to think the best of people, though, always prepare for the worst. Better to be prepared, and only a pessimist can have a nice surprise. But still, I like to think that facts and logic and reason win out, not necessarily in the short term, but in the long term. I tend to think power should be devolved as much as possible into the hands of the people. But all of these assumptions, all of these points of view have been horribly challenged by the past few years. If I favour greater democratisation, if I favour reforms of electoral systems, or even a technologically enabled direct democracy, and yet I see that a substantial block of people will vote for Trump, will vote for Brexit, will vote for or back even more extreme people than that. That shakes your faith in people, that people will make good decisions, that people are capable of protecting themselves from being scammed or whatever. And I don't think at this point in either of those cases a meaningful defense can be made of the other side. I struggle to try to understand the other points of view and be sympathetic to them and to take their arguments in the strongest form that they can be. But with everything swirling around Trump, with his weird, aberrant behaviour and everything else, you would think people would be able to admit that maybe they made a mistake, which isn't to say that Hillary was a good option, just the better option. And it's not to say Trump is a fascist. That is absurd hyperbole. And over here, Brexit, I've been on a quest for about the last 2, maybe 3 months, trying to find a reason someone had for voting Brexit that wasn't either parochial, so like fishing communities, they're very concerned with that one singular issue. That's parochial, that's local. It's rather short-sighted. I can sympathise and understand why they might be against the EU, but still, that's parochial. Or just wrong-headed, and rooted in ignorance. I'm not saying that to be mean. I mean, we've had a disinformation campaign about the EU run for God knows how many years by the Murdoch press. So when people talk about low information voters and things, it's not a very nice thing to say, but it's not really an insult. People are uninformed, people are misinformed, people are disinformed. So how can I be pro-democratisation in that situation? And it's not an untackleable issue. This is one of the points of education, to ensure that you have an informed and capable populace that's able to make an informed decision on these things, rather than a misinformed decision or a disinformed decision or a not informed at all decision. But then you look at the complexities of the modern world, you look at the economic complexities, you look at the technological complexities, and how can most people be said to be in any kind of position to make a meaningful decision about limiting cryptography in computer systems for communications, or the complex economic forces at work in terms of the EU. You know, you ask someone to name EU legislation that they don't like, and they'll tend to waffle and and ah and maybe say something about bananas. You know, it's just, they know that the EU is bad because they've been told repeatedly that the EU is bad, but then they can't tell you a way that it's bad. I mean, an example, I gave the parochial example, the example of the big one that people keep mentioning is sovereignty, but I don't think anyone knows what it means. It just seems to be this kind of feel-good, nationalistic, patriotic shibboleth that gets run out when someone's backed into a corner. And we never lost sovereignty. It's like saying that Basingstoke doesn't have sovereignty because it's part of England. Yeah, but it participates in the democracy of England. You know, it's not disenfranchised, it's not an imperial property being ruled from afar, it's a full participant, in the same way that the UK was a full participant in the EU structure and democracy. So I haven't heard anything that makes any sense, that isn't parochial, that isn't misinformed from anyone, and I've been on quite the quest to try and find out. Yeah, and people misrepresenting history when it comes to the EEC referendum and joining and so on. And things are looking bleak, very bleak indeed. Theresa May is being criminally irresponsible in the way that she's doing things. She's trying to force it down to a binary choice of no deal or her deal, neither of which are good. We now have, this isn't Project Fear, this is not the Project Fear was ever really Project Fear, but you know, this is stuff coming from the cabinet, that they're laying in emergency supplies, troops are being told that they may be called upon to do this, that and the other, even to quell civil unrest, in the kind of thing that we haven't really seen since the Great Depression. And we got through the Great Recession, which was only, you know, a few percentage points constriction in the economy, whereas a no-deal Brexit could be as much as a 10% choke on the economy. So if you think how bad you've had things since 2008, double, triple, even quadruple that, and that's how bad things could be, and probably are going to be with a no-deal Brexit. But how do you change people's minds? I've tried the logical and rational and reasonable approach. No dice. Tried emotional appeals. No dice. I've got a friend who's kind of like a caseworker for the police when it comes to issues of fraud. And occasionally they'll talk in very general terms about what happens. But a common and sad phenomenon is that people who have been defrauded, who've been fooled, who've been scammed, often refuse to admit it. Often their family has to get involved, to get the police involved to investigate, and they will continue to make excuses for the person who is scamming them. It's like they're so committed to having been fooled that they cannot admit to themselves that they made a mistake, that they were scammed, that they were fooled, that they were misled. They're just incapable of doing it. Pride is a hell of a drug. And I think something similar happens here with the way that people continue to double down no matter how bad things get. I've asked people, my polls didn't get much response, but I've asked people one-on-one, you know, is Brexit worth the breakup of the Union? Because Scotland's going to be looking for another independence referendum, and Northern Ireland, if it doesn't go the way of the dogs, may go the way of Ireland, and Wales isn't too happy either. And most, not all, but most of the Brexiteers that I've talked to have said, yeah, they're perfectly happy to break up the Union. Good riddance to Scotland, they say. So that doesn't get through to people. I talk about the problems that people I know are having, international couples with kids whose status is completely up in the air at the moment. They don't know whether they're going to be able to stay, whether they'll have to go to the other country, what will happen. It must be immensely stressful. I mean, my partner's not from the EU, but she's an immigrant, and she's been upset a few times by people having general conversations about immigrants in a way that's disparaging. But they don't mean her. We don't mean people like you. So I've tried bringing this up, that couples are going to be split up, that families are going to be split up. They already have, due to the tightening of non-EU immigration. And they're willing to sacrifice people's lives and families as well. Yeah, I know another international couple, not married yet. They were trying to save money to the point where she'd be able to join him over here. And they're devastated because they are going to have to break up, because, or at least it looks like that's going to be the way, because without the relatively forgiving status of freedom of movement, they can't meet what seem to be the immigration requirements. They live frugally. They've got enough money that they won't need to rely on the state, but the state asks for a lot more than that to allow someone to immigrate here. So there's an engaged couple that's going to be split up. Nobody cares about that either. You bring up the contraction of the economy, think that's a valid price to pay. So they don't care about the personal impact, the political impact, the economic impact. They don't seem to know why they want Brexit, because none of their reasons hold water, but they still do. And like I say, I found this incredibly challenging, trying to understand their point of view and to suppress my reaction, which is to dismiss people as stupid, which they're not, or psychopathic, which they're not. They just prioritize things differently. And people are so ignorant of everything that the EU did. I don't think that's their fault. I think that's the Murdoch press's fault. The only way out of this mess does appear to be a people's vote, and I'm not that confident, due to my experiences here and how much people seem to be willing to sacrifice for no reason, really. I'm not confident that Remain would win a second referendum. That's depressing. So yeah, I found this all very challenging to my worldviews. I used to believe in the commons and the public will, and that people could be trusted to make good decisions. Don't think that so much anymore, though it's not entirely their fault. Yay. Existential crises for Christmas. Zang.